Hello and welcome to Green and Gold Radio. I'm your host, William Lavin Masters. We're here with an early morning podcast. I haven't done this since sophomore year. Not this early, at least. So, last week in Spanish class, you were talking about free will a little bit.
I was indeed.
So what's your take on this? That's the basis for this podcast. We're talking about free will, and this is kind of an interesting argument I haven't heard before.
So I have a little bit of a bold take here. Might ruffle some feathers, but I'm here to tell you that free will does not exist. All right? All the choices that you think you're having in life, it's just the illusion of agency. Really, what's affecting the outcome of those choices and those decisions is all a range of factors, including your genetics, your experiences, what you had for breakfast that day, who you talked to, how much sleep you got. All of those factors are playing into your subconscious mind, which is leading you to an ultimate decision. And you have the illusion like you made a choice, but in reality, you were always going to be led to that decision based on what happened before you. It's all just cause and effect. You see, if I wake up one morning and I decide, I'm going to be real quirky this morning. You know what? I'm going to have a taco for breakfast. And I think I'm so quirky. I just made this bold statement by having a taco for breakfast. But really, what happened there was I had a predisposition towards tacos because of my love for Mexican food. Maybe the amount of sleep I had last night dictated me to want to have a taco for breakfast. Maybe a conversation I had with my friend a week ago that I'm currently forgetting, but my self-conscious mind is recalling about having a taco for breakfast. All these things could lead me to an eventual decision. So that's basically the basis of my argument there, is that these environmental and genetic and all sorts of factors are really driving your decision-making process and not your actual conscious mind.
So why? I mean, where did this idea come from?
I mean, it's really just simple science if you look at it. I will have to give credit to one of my good friends, Scott, because we actually had this debate over free will a couple of years ago now. And we eventually, in having that debate, we came to this general understanding of where our opinions are sort of falling now, which is this category that free will is not really a thing.
So what would you say to the idea that all of your decisions might limit the amount of decisions you can make? Your factors might limit the amount of decisions you can make, but you still have a select number of decisions you could make. Do you think it is truly just one outcome, or do you think there could be a range of outcomes? Because, I mean, cause and effect scenarios don't always end in one cause and one effect. Often it's one cause and 15 effects or something to that effect.
And to that point, I think there's obviously multiple outcomes that could happen, right? So many things could happen, but it's not about what could happen. It's about what happened. If we look at, I like to talk about the example of probability. It's pretty universally accepted that probability isn't really a thing. It doesn't actually exist in our world.
Wait, what?
Well, yeah, probability isn't a thing. If I flip a coin, the chances to us of that coin being heads or tails is 50-50 because
Right.
We can't understand every factor that's going into the flipping of that coin. But the real probability of that coin landing on heads or tails is 100-0. If I flip a coin, it's going to land on one side based on where that coin is in my hand, how many scratches are on that coin, what the air resistance is, if their coin is a little weighted differently. All these things are going to give me an exact flip that's going to result in an exact answer. And if we had a robot that could control it could control all the outside factors, it could control how hard it flipped it, we would be able to predict the flipping of a coin with 100% accuracy every time. The probability is only there because we can't see the fact, we can't understand everything that's going into it.
Interesting.
So the same thing is going on with these variety of choices. Yes, there's countless possible outcomes that we see as probability, possible outcomes, because we can't understand all the factors that are going into it. But really, the outcome that eventually happens was always going to happen like that based on the factors.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So for the coin toss example, though, Wouldn't you say that before you toss the coin, it is 50-50, but once you start flipping the coin, it becomes 100-0?
Well,
Because that's when the factors actually take control?
I don't think so, because to us, before we flip the coin, obviously, like I was saying, obviously it's 50-50 because we can't see all the factors, but all the factors are still in place. Like, even as simple as how far down my thumb is in my hand or how high it is, that's a precursor to the flip, but that's still a factor that's going to affect it. We would be able to, even before we flipped it, we would be able to tell what the air resistance is. We would be able to tell if we could measure these things theoretically. We would be able to tell if there's any obscurities in the coin that are going to make it change paths midair. But it's 50-50 simply because we can't see these things.
Interesting. Wouldn't you say the biggest factor is the force put on the coin?
I think that would be one of the biggest factors for sure. And that's what I'm saying. If you could build a robot to have the exact same flipping motion every single time, and you could control the external factors such as drag and all this, and have the exact same coin be flipped, you'd be able to predict the outcome with essentially 100% accuracy.
Interesting. So, if you apply that to life, wouldn't you say that like the coin, because in my opinion, I believe that the decision isn't made until the final factor is put into play. Like, the amount of force that you ultimately put on the coin could, if it's large enough, end up being heads or tails. And until that final factor is put into play, you can't really tell. But if you could apply that to life, wouldn't you think that even up until the moment of making a decision, the decision isn't truly made?
I think that there's, up until the moment of the decision, there is still forces and external factors acting on the outcome of the decision. But again, it's not really you in that moment making the decision. It's everything up until that moment leading to an outcome. It's still just this theory of cause and effect. Like, looking at the human brain, it's at its most basic level is just chemical and electrical signals. It still follows the rules of physics, same as everything else.
Right.
It doesn't magically these signals are what make us like think, but they don't break the rules of physics in any way. They're not like some anomaly in our world. It still follows general principles that we've studied in various other things throughout time. It's just a super complex example of that.
Interesting. So you think that all of history is already set up, already lined up. There's no difference we could make to human history whatsoever.
I think all of history played out exactly how it was supposed to based on what happened before in history, and obviously the cause and effect, like I was saying.
And then the future. I mean, the future of mankind is already set in stone then.
The future of mankind is not technically set in stone in this moment, but will be set in stone as we move along and as these experiences continue to influence the outcome. Like, theoretically, if for a thought experiment, if you will, if I were to have a time machine where I could go forward in time and watch a tennis match or any sporting event for really that matter,
right.
And I could watch that and I could see the outcome of that sporting event, and then I traveled back in time to right before that event started, you can't convince me that the event wouldn't play out the exact same way in that moment. So it's like the same thing with the future. If we were able to somehow know the factors that would lead up to an eventual future, we would be able to predict the future essentially. But obviously that's not really possible. So that's why we have this illusion of an unpredictable random distribution of future.
Interesting. So, if we're talking about time travel, let's talk about Back to the Future a little bit. So you think that Back to the Future is just completely wrong altogether? You could never influence the future like they do in that movie.
Well, no, I think the key thing there is they go back to the future and they make little changes, right, that are affecting these factors that then have massive implications in the future. I think it's pretty accurate, to be honest, because if you go back and change little things, that sets a new environment and that sets new groundwork that is going to build up, I've been talking about, into an eventual new future, new outcome.
Interesting. So we ultimately can't make any decisions for ourselves, is the standpoint that you hold.
Ultimately, it's not us making decisions, because there's a conscious part of our brain and there's a subconscious part of our brain, and a large portion of our brain is the subconscious part of our brain, and ultimately, even though we're not currently experiencing the factors, our subconscious mind is remembering and utilizing those factors to ultimately outcome or lead us to an outcome. So yes, I would say that it's not necessarily us, our conscious minds, making the decision, even though we have that illusion like we are. It's really, if you look at it, it's not the case.
So what's the point in doing anything then? What's the point in living if you can't determine your own fate?
Well, that's a question I often get asked when talking about this, and I don't think that the theory of life being meaningless and life not having free will are mutually exclusive. I don't think one can exist with they can't exist without each other. I think even though like these decisions are, if you will, predetermined, that doesn't mean that life has any less meaningless. And the fact that we often have no idea that these decisions are predetermined, we still have this illusion of agency, makes life feel like we have free will. And just because an experience or a decision is quote unquote predetermined doesn't mean you're not going to enjoy that experience, and doesn't mean that experience isn't going to add value to your life. Doesn't mean we should just give up and just reel in the towel, because we can still enjoy life even if it's set out in a way.
Interesting. So, are you a man of faith? Let's ask that.
I'm definitely a man of faith. What religion I fall into aspect, I haven't really gotten there.
Interesting.
As a man.
I respect that.
But I do believe there are powers acting on our world that are above our own.
So you're that term that Mr. Yako hates so much, spiritual but not religious.
I guess so.
So if you believe that, so do you think that all of these factors, all of life, is like pre-written? So like, let's take Marvel for existence. Are you a Marvel watcher? You watch Marvel?
I'm a Marvel watcher. I can't say I've watched all the Marvel movies.
That's
I can't
fair.
say I'm like a big.
You don't
Marvel
watch it
buff,
religiously,
but I definitely enjoy some Marvel movies. Yes.
Okay. So in the Marvel franchise, the idea of fate is predetermined, like you've said, but instead of all of the factors of your past playing on your future, it's someone who's already written the whole story of everything. Mm-hmm. It's interesting. Do you think that possibly ties into your idea whatsoever, or do you think they're completely independent of one another?
I think they're pretty independent, because my idea of a god, if you will, is more of an observer. I don't think it's an interventionist. If can't speak right now,
You're good.
Interventionist, if you will, because I think this God figure that we talk about doesn't want to influence our lives. He wants us to live life without powerly influence, and so I think it doesn't really affect this phenomenon that I've been talking about, at least in my view, because of that fact.
Interesting. So, simply based off this, where do you think, based on the factors of your past, that you will be in the future? You're good. It's just bright.
See, I have a lot of hopes. I have a lot of goals for the future, but like I've been talking about, I have no idea what those factors are. I know like basic things, like I can remember some of my experiences. Say, for example, if I'm in a hockey game and I'm faced with a certain situation that I've been faced with before, I've learned from those mistakes. I've learned from my past experiences that'll probably influence a new outcome. But I can't possibly see all the little intricate details that are making up what's propelling me towards the future. So I can't really say where I'll end up or where I'll be. I can hope, I can have goals, as most people should, but I don't think I could make the statement of where I would actually be.
It's entirely fair. So, do you think that having goals and hopes is a factor in this ultimate equation that you have?
I think it definitely could be considered one because if you have an inclination for, like I was talking about it earlier, I have an inclination for Mexican food. I have an inclination for liking tacos. So if I have an inclination or a goal for doing something in the future, then I think that's definitely going to swing into the decision and into the process of potentially influencing an outcome.
Fascinating. Speaking of hockey, congratulations on making, which hockey team was it? I saw it on Instagram the other day.
So it's the Anchorage Wolverines. It's a North American Hockey League team.
That's
it's
awesome.
Anchorage, Alaska. So yeah,
That's
I got
sweet.
tendered there. Pretty cool.
Awesome. When are you starting?
So the main camp, what they call it, that's like the first step in the trial process is I believe next August. So I got a little bit. It's not till next year that I'd be going there. And even though they do this thing called tendering you, which means they have your rights. You can't sign with any other teams. You still have to go out and make the team. So I still got to go out there, perform, make the team next August, and yeah.
So do you think based on all the factors of your past, it's predetermined that you will make that team?
I'd love to hope so.
Well, thank you so much for coming on, Jackson. This has been Green and Gold Radio. I am your host, William Plavin Masters.
And I'm Jackson Stimple.
And we'll see you next week.